Hey, what's going on, guys? I am Nathaniel Whittemore, host of the Breakdown Podcast, and I am here with Justin Moses and Kane Warwick, and we are going to be talking some synthetics, some Chainlink, and some DeFi. What's going on, guys?
Hey Nathaniel.
Hey, what's happening? Good to connect again.
We're doing this from a variety of different time zones, so it should be interesting. But let's start with the background. What's a short version of what synthetics does and where it came from?
So synthetics allows for the issuance of synthetic derivatives on Ethereum. So it allows people to get price exposure to various assets. So things like gold, silver, Bitcoin, all while staying natively on Ethereum. And it actually came out of an earlier project, or pivoted from an earlier project called Haven, which was a stablecoin project, a decentralized stablecoin project.
And so let's talk about some of the key transitions, because I think a lot of what our conversation today is about is kind of how the protocol has evolved, key decisions it's made, how that's intersected it with other parts of the market, and what that kind of means, or what that can tell us about other things happening in the industry. So first, or one key inflection point, as you mentioned, was from Haven to synthetics. How did that transition come about?
I think in 2018, there was this emergence of all the regulated stablecoins, so USDC, Paxos, etc. And we just found ourselves in a position where it was going to be really hard to carve out, a niche for ourselves, particularly with Maker, doing quite well. And so we made a decision to just accelerate this, transition that we'd sort of planned to multiple different currencies, and then eventually to different assets.
Yeah, and I guess what started to get you guys excited about the idea of these sort of these synthetic assets? Was that idea bouncing around in the back of your head? Was it something that kind of came up as you started to look at sort of this transition? I'm interested in that, and I guess for people who haven't spent much time with that, maybe we can also just talk about why it's such a powerful idea. Because I think it's something that it's sort of it seems, I think, to some people kind of in the weeds, but it's actually such a huge part of the financial market that we're trying to build.
Justin, do you want to?
Yeah, sure. I think originally when we went into synthetics, the sort of way we branded it internally was multi-currency, because we basically took the idea of USD and then we said, let's add on a bunch of other foreign currencies. So we had GBP, and we had AUD and NZD. And we saw a lot of, we sort of believed that there'd be a lot of utility in that. We thought, that would make a lot of sense. People would want, most of the team was in Australia, so people would want Aussie dollars and what have you. But it wasn't actually until we added synthetic Bitcoin that we started seeing quite a bit of pickup. And I think that was that was a very early indication that there's some value here. People who are on Ethereum want access to Bitcoin, or price access to Bitcoin, but they don't want to actually need to hold Bitcoin. So we were seeing quite a lot of people move in. I guess you could do it, with wrap BTC, but the idea of a completely, a permissionless non-KYC synthetic Bitcoin was pretty appealing. And so we started to see people move into those sort of synthetic assets because they really just wanted price exposure without having the hassle of moving over to a different chain.
So you have kind of, on the one hand, this it's a crypto native synthetic assets that gets you interested in this, but then you start to see the possibility of synthetic assets, across a variety, right? Because the full spectrum of what you guys do is much bigger than just crypto assets. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. We have commodities, we have equities, with Forex, as I said before, and we also have these novel index tokens that we created. The SEX token for centralized exchanges, and the DeFi token for a number of different DeFi protocols. And that's particularly DeFi token has been pretty interesting of late.
And so for just, again, to help people kind of fully understand exactly how those are being used, are those mostly for traders, speculators, people who want, different types of exposure? I mean, it feels like it opens up a whole different realm of kind of ways to make bets on the market and do other things as well. But
yeah, there's sort of two things. So it really is just for speculation, for price speculation, but It's also for people may want to hedge, right? So we also have these inverse tokens that they're kind of like shorts, and they track the inverse price movement, so they can be a useful hedge, right, for people in the market. But the various the second sort of utility you have besides price action is this idea that 100% of that synth at any moment can be exchanged into any other synth. So because synthetic assets is not a regular DEX, because it's not there's not makers takers. It's literally just someone coming along saying I want to reprice some of this synth into any other synth. So if you're holding like SDeFi, yes, you're getting price exposure to like a basket of DeFi tokens, but you also have this sort of utility that at any moment you can take any of that amount of SDeFi and reprice it into any other synth with no slippage.
So I want to get a little bit more into some of the sort of technical side of the project, but I do think it's interesting to see, one of the things that's fascinating watching the emergence of this type of product is, we're still kind of in the early adopter stage of a lot of parts of DeFi, but it's hard to look at something like what you guys are building and not think that when traditional financial folks like actually kind of take the time to grok and understand it, they're not just going to be so jazzed, right? The opportunities, the ways that they can interact with it are just so different and kind of more vast in a lot of ways than even traditional market products. Have you guys seen an uptick? We've seen a lot of DeFi action, at least in our part of the world over the last few months. Are you noticing more people coming in or getting curious from the outside, or is it still kind of limited to the crypto insiders?
I mean, a lot of it is still, very crypto native people that are in the space. But we are seeing, I think, for the first time, people that are maybe more traditional finance, but have some crypto, trading, for example, or like have a crypto desk within their firm that, were even as early as this year, right? Early this year, January, February, not necessarily super engaged with DeFi, having really had their eyes open in the last, few months to all the different things that can happen. And I think, one of the things that has really shifted their thinking, because it's a huge pain point, is this idea of, being able to connect all these different protocols together permissionlessly, right? When you're in traditional finance, you need APIs for everything, you need permission, and everything's very credentialed and siloed, and it's hard to kind of get access to these systems. And so I think when they come into DeFi and just see that everything's open, all the data's open, you can see what's happening everywhere at all times. It is a kind of revelatory experience, right? And it's pretty exciting.
Yeah, so that makes sense. So you're seeing kind of like the so far the new entrants are sort of people who had dabbled, who had some exposure to crypto, but who are now, I guess you could say, falling further down that rabbit hole in a big way. So we were talking about kind of key transition moments in Synthetic's trajectory. We talked about sort of the move into the fundamental, the pivot into this space. Then another one that you guys had mentioned when we were talking about this before is a kind of a moment where you decided to focus on incentivizing staking. Can you talk a little bit about what that was about and what you guys did?
Yeah. It's funny because I remember when I was really ramping up pretty strongly in 2018. I remember Kane sort of bouncing around this idea about what if the supply wasn't fixed? When Haven, before Synthetics was created, it was like 100 million fixed supply, and we're like, let's follow the best practices of Ethereum. And then at some point, it's sort of, I remember Kane mentioning it, and sort of he was looking at things like LivePeer and other things around, and sort of saying, well, why can't we? What if we were to actually change our inflation, and what if we were to incentivize people? And it was something that I can't remember actually, Kane, what your attitude was to it as we got closer to the release in March. But I remember there was a period in early 2019 where we started ramping up pretty strongly and had a pretty good feeling it was going to be successful. But I think we were all pretty blown away with it about how much it turned the dial in terms of people taking their SNX and actually staking it.
Yeah, I think a big concern for that was, going back to my Bitcoin roots of don't mess with monetary policy, right? Like monetary policy is sacrosanct, and if you start, demonstrating that you're willing to make changes to, supply and things like that, then, you just open up this Pandora's box that, is very dangerous. And I was expecting that there would be like this ideological rejection of this idea. And actually what happened was the exact opposite, where all of the people who were still engaged with the project were super excited about the idea of being paid to do the thing that they're already doing, right? The protocol paying them in more of the network to participate and engage and stake and do all the things that they're already doing was really exciting. And they then started evangelizing it, and the flywheel got going and really kind of accelerated through that early part of 2019.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's we're going to look back at these days as this very weird. I mean, it's so early. Like, people have been around long enough that it feels like it's been going for a long time, but it's just so insanely early. And I think that like a lot of what the task of this moment or the last couple of years has been figuring out where you put how you align kind of incentives, right? And design a system, an economic ecosystem that people want to participate in. But then on top of that, kind of what are the principles underlying those economic systems that need to be held? And within that context, trying to apply the model of one asset that has a specific type of purpose, to another asset ecosystem doesn't necessarily play out, right? And I think that the fact that sort of it was this decision to do something that originally you had thought wasn't the right fit, actually kind of, as you put it, got the flywheel going, right? Made the ecosystem make sense to people, got them to kind of go deeper in it, is a good example of that. And to some extent, I guess we have to expect that those types of learnings are going to happen only when they get tried.
Interestingly,
just
speaking about Bitcoin, I mean, one analogy that we like to use is, SNX stakers every week, they get to claim their rewards, and they claim both SUSD in the form of a portion of all the trading that's going on, and SNX in the form of staking rewards, the inflation rewards. We kind of look at the inflation rewards as like a mining reward, right? It's something meant to bootstrap the network, but over time the mining rewards will dissipate, and then it will be the stakers will all be relying on transaction fees, like Bitcoin or an Ethereum miner.
Yeah, it's interesting. The evolution. There's one of the most interesting ongoing debates is how these incentives transition at different periods in protocols' lives. There's another big piece that came out about that in the context of Bitcoin, even though it's a 20, 30 year ahead debate. But let's talk about oracles, because I know this is another kind of key transitional moment for you. So first of all, I guess, what is the role of oracles in synthetics right now?
So
sorry, go.
Oh, okay. So oracles will at any moment tell us how much outstanding debt there is in the synthetic system. So the synthetics debt pool is this shared collection of synths, right? And every synth is denominated in some kind of asset. You have synthetic USD, synthetic ETH, whatever. So the entire debt pool, when you look at it in, say, a USD basis, it is the USD value of all the different synths at any moment in time. And to figure out what that USD value is, we need to have oracles to tell us what these values are. So oracles will, go out to the real world, outside blockchain, figure out what these prices are from various APIs and push them in into the blockchain. So basically, the oracles tell us, how much debt is in the system, and how much, what value of collateral in the form of SNX is backing that debt.
And so this is obviously a pretty essential part of building the system. And so you guys originally had sort of spun your own oracles up. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, back in the day when we were first building this, there just wasn't an option, right? There was no sort of oracle, right? So, Maker and us were both kind of in the same situation where we had to, build our own oracles. So, I think that if you were doing something today, there's a number of different options, that people have kind of different paths that people have gone down. But certainly, for us, the availability of Chainlink now is a huge win, compared to where we were having to own this infrastructure ourselves.
Yeah, and so you, I remember because Kane, we actually did a podcast about this with Sergey when you guys made the announcement. But how did you start looking to Chainlink? What was that early vetting process like? What did you want to make sure? What were your requirements for ensuring that this was going to be a good fit?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting, right? Like we went out to the market and we sort of said, okay, what's available here, right? And there was nothing really in production. Like even Chainlink wasn't really in production. They had a few price feeds that were published, but no one was really consuming them. And we did our research. We talked to different teams. We'd met a couple of the Chainlink guys at different events and stuff, and we just started talking it through. But it was a very sort of slow process, and Justin and I going back and forth to kind of understand the different trade-offs and talk it through. But I think I'm not usually the most cautious person, but this is one thing where like we really felt like we were handing over a huge responsibility in the system, and we wanted to make sure that not just the tech, but also like the culture of the team that it was being handed over to, like everything really kind of mapped out, and so we spent a long time vetting Chainlink and kind of getting to that level of comfort before we were willing to go all in.
Yeah. Justin, from your perspective, what were other important features? I mean, this is was this part of a larger process about how you guys think about decentralization in the system?
Yeah, I mean, as Cam was saying, we looked at a number of different suppliers. I think our attitude has been like, we're going to do our best to, we'll try out, whatever we need to, but, we'll commit to Chainlink, but, if in the future something else did come along that was absolutely amazingly incredible, well, then we potentially could move to that. So we sort of still kept ourselves, still keep it a sense of dynamicism if we need to. Like what we have is we have a contract that extrapolates, it abstracts away both our Oracle and the Chainlink oracles, and in the future we may end up adding in other oracles. So what we really needed was to see who was moving, with a lot of speed, who was the most willing to adapt to what we needed, who had the best plan for decentralization, and as Kane said, who had the best kind of engineering culture to work with, and monitoring and such. And so for us, that Chainlink was a pretty easy decision to go forward. And yeah, it's pretty solid experience. I think like when I look at some of their back end systems for the different nodes and on their builds and their tests, they got pretty flawed. So I feel like they're, at least on an engineering level, they're definitely got their heads in the right spot.
So what is the state of that integration or that collaboration today?
So right now, around the end of the year, so around the end of 2019, I think it was in December, we moved all our Forex feeds over, and since then we've added the Nikkei and the FTSE, so 2 equity indices. So we have the total of 9 feeds right now, right? So 5 Forex, 2 commodities, gold and silver, and then FTSE and Nikkei. And as of Monday, we're looking to do all the remainder of the synthetic assets. So that'll be all of the different crypto assets that we have. So that's, I believe another 14 feeds, which then feeds into another, I think it's 20 cents and a number of different binary option markets. So as of Monday, or I guess Tuesday in Australia, we should be with our Pollux release, we should be basically totally on Chainlink. Our Oracle code will stay there for one more release, just be sitting in the background, not doing anything. And then in the next release in about a month, we're just going to rip that code out altogether from our contracts.
Got it. So it's actually kind of really coming together in a big way now, basically.
Yeah, definitely. It's something.
It's a big deal.
Yeah, it's something we've been wanting for a long time, but as Kane said, it's something we're very cautious about. We have had issues in the past with oracles. We had one a couple of years ago that was pretty infamous. So we know all too well the kind of 24/7 pain of monitoring and managing price feeds. And it's interesting because it's something that I think a lot of people were thinking about when they think of oracles. They think about, okay, oracles can be attacked or subverted, and what's your crypto economic incentives. But a big risk is also just data integrity. right? And that's just data availability. Like just when you're dealing with APIs around the world, these actually aren't that easy problems. Like if you have, if you're fetching from a number of different APIs, like what's your source of truth API, right? And if your source of truth API goes down, how do you handle that, right? There's lots of different edge cases and stuff in terms of managing oracles that are actually quite tricky. And we've been dealing with it for a number of years, and Chainlink have now been really ramping up, and it's interesting and pretty impressive to see where they've got to now. That's sort of the level of rigidity they have towards their data feeds.
Yeah, these problems are immensely complex even before you kind of talk about adversarial scenarios, right? Let's shift a little bit to synthetics today. We were talking before this about just some of the things that you guys have been observing and seeing and where your priorities are. And one of the things that you mentioned was of seeing kind of interesting behavior around SUSD that sort of completed a circle, I guess. So one is maybe specifically, how are people using SUSD right now? And then second is maybe just more broadly, what are you noticing kind of in the market with how people are interacting with synthetics?
Yeah, I think we've gotten to a level of liquidity and scale now with SUSD that it's becoming an acceptable choice as a stablecoin, as a decentralized stablecoin. So some of the yield farming incentives are leveraging it. We're seeing a lot of activity happening through AMMs, so things like Curve, Uniswap, etc. And I think the next step for us and something that we just haven't been able to kind of bridge across the chasm on has been centralized exchange liquidity. Really getting SUSD kind of entrenched in the centralized exchange world, and part of the reason for that is that it is an on ramp into DEXs and various DeFi protocols, and so I think that's kind of be the next sort of focus for us to get some more liquidity on centralized exchanges and really make it kind of a ubiquitous alternative decentralized stablecoin to DAI.
What else are you guys noticing this year in terms of just kind of behavior activity? Where are people focusing? Is there anything that surprised you about activity over the last few months?
Oh no, I'll let you go, Kane. It's been more your observations. I was just smiling in anticipation.
One thing that's been really interesting to watch has been the sort of wrapped Bitcoin and tokenized Bitcoin and in our case synthetic Bitcoin narrative really emerge, right? I think there are a lot of like BTC maxis that were somewhat they're dismissive of Ethereum just in general, right? But certainly dismissive of how much demand and utility could be generated on Ethereum with various different implementations of Bitcoin. And so we now have a pool in Curve that at one point had $100 million worth of BTC tokens, right? So, wrapped Bitcoin, which is a custodial version, Ren BTC, which is a sort of decentralized custodial version, and then synthetic BTC. And I think that a lot of people were kind of blown away by that. So the combination of wrapped Bitcoin going into Maker, these very large Curve pools, have all kind of combined to really accelerate this Bitcoin narrative. And I think that it's only going to continue as people with idle BTC that maybe hasn't been transacted in months or years kind of wake up this dormant hoard of wealth that starts coming in and chasing yield in DeFi. I think that's a thing that's going to happen over the next 6 months, and it's going to see a lot of value flowing into DeFi protocols.
It's super interesting observation. Arthur Hayes actually wrote his latest trader newsletter. He wrote about exactly this, where like even the sort of the truest believers, like the hodler's hodler, are being like, well, but where like could be getting yield for, if I'm not going to get rid of this thing, like am I missing out? And that's that conversation happened 6 months ago in the context of things like BlockFi and other lending protocols, but now it's kind of shifting over into the permissionless DeFi world too.
Yeah.
Let's look forward. What are the things that you guys are building? What in terms of process stuff are you looking forward to? I know that you have both, kind of product pipeline, but also process pipeline, right? Places you're trying to go with governance as well.
Yeah,
I let Justin talk to process.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, a big theme for us, obviously, has been decentralization. Like, we wrote an article recently about decommissioning the foundation in Australia and moving completely to 3 different DAOs. So the Synthetics DAO, which manages the treasury, the Grants DAO, which manages community projects, and the Protocol DAO, which basically manages the entire protocol. And part of one of the things moving to Chainlink is for the protocol DAO to decentralize further. But another big part of it is what I was sort of saying before about on-chain voting and being able to veto migrations to the protocols and the such. But the other big sort of area for us, which I guess kind of goes under the decentralization bucket, is moving on to L2. So this is something that we're very excited about. We're working with the Optimism team to get something up pretty soon. We did a demo a few months ago on L2, and it was really popular. I think lots of people were interested in this idea of trading, and we sort of got a glimpse of what the future might be. And it was actually quite funny because we started dealing with UI issues that we just hadn't worried about, because for so long, obviously, blocks take however many seconds to be mined. And so when you move on L2, everything's sort of happening in real time, and we were like running into memory issues and like all sorts of different problems with WebSockets that we just hadn't dealt with. So yeah, from my end, more on the sort of technical side, it's like decentralizing to the point where everything is done on chain, migrations and votes, and then improving scalability by going on to L2. Okay, wants to talk about futures.
Yeah, I think probably the biggest product launch that's coming up, which has been a long time in the making, almost 18 months now, is the launch of synthetic futures. Thankfully, we didn't launch it earlier than this year, because there were a number of things that we needed to get in place infrastructure wise, around both the oracles and latency and a number of things. But I think it's going to be, other than DYDX, which is probably the most successful sort of crypto perps, decentralized perp protocol. It's going to be the first big launch of a perpetual market for things like BTC and ETH in kind of an AMM style rather than like off-chain order matching. So there's been a few little tests here and there, but this is going to be, I think, a big deal, and the first time we've really seen a protocol be able to kind of take this on in a decentralized way with like an AMM style trading experience rather than a limit order book. So it's going to be a pretty big deal.
Amazing. Well, listen, guys, I really appreciate you taking some time today to talk through Synthetics, how it came to be where it is today, how Chainlink became a part of that story and your collaboration. I guess maybe let's just wrap with, we've had 6 months of kind of surging, or I guess at least 3 or 4 months of surging focus and attention on DeFi. If you could make a wish for DeFi for the rest of the year, what would it be? We'll start with you, Justin. I'll put you on the spot.
I mean, I'd love to see people coalesce around one particular L2 solution, and I do think optimistic rollups are the right way forward. So I think that's I think seeing a lot of the top DeFi projects come together and work on a particular solution L2 will provide a lot of confidence in the market that gas prices are going to be solved, and that a lot of people who can't afford to use Ethereum anymore actually have some sort of this future on the platform.
I think for me, my biggest concerns are around direct on-chain governance. We're starting to see governance wars play out. In places like Curve, where you've got votes that are attempting to divert funds, from one participant or one section of the protocol to another section of the protocol, and I think that's going to get really messy. And so, something that I really want to see is a little bit more experimentation and not just going full-fledged direct on-chain voting. What we've done is kind of have this very messy, rough consensus feeding into protocol governance. And while I think some people have kind of dismissed that as maybe not optimal or not as efficient as it could be, it's prevented us from doing a lot of things that I think would have been detrimental. And so, my hope is that we have more experimentation around governance and can kind of solve some of these problems and start to really, see some alternative solutions to just direct on-chain voting.
Great thoughts, guys. Well, I appreciate your time today and look forward to seeing what you guys do in the coming months.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
All right, guys. Well, thank you so much again, Nathaniel Whittemore, Kane Warwick, and Justin Moses of Synthetics with a great final panel. I just want to again thank everybody for joining us for our first great day of SmartCon. I know it was a long one, but the reason that it needed to be was because there's just so much interest from the various teams working inside the Chainlink ecosystem to be part of this. Again, you heard from some of the top people in DeFi. You heard from some of the top people in enterprise. You heard about blockchain gaming. You heard about random number generation. You heard about VRF. And the coolest thing is that's just day one. So tomorrow we're going to do this whole thing again. It's basically same time, kind of starting at 8:10 a.m. Eastern. Why do we do it on Saturday? Because we want everybody to be able to watch this one, to see all the great things that are happening again inside the Chainlink ecosystem. So Sergey is going to be speaking. Ari Jules is going to be speaking. Check the schedule out. There's a ton more other people as we basically have 10 hours straight of, putting together, again, one of the largest, if not the largest DeFi conference that has basically ever existed. So thank you for being part of it. Again, I hope you have a great night and look forward to seeing you tomorrow morning.